us started. Yeah. Good morning to all. Sorry to be so loud. What else is new? That hurts, Marilyn. I resemble that remark. I'm deeply wounded. I really am. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Most gracious, generous God, we give you thanks for this beautiful day, for the season of celebration and resurrection and new life, for the privilege of being your people called together by your voice. We ask you would bless us this morning, and especially you would embrace our sister Emily with your presence and your love and your strength. Unite us all in bonds of compassion, peace, and hope. And all this we pray through our shepherd, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Please grab a seat as soon as you can. We want to, oh, there you go. Okay, it's loud. I know that everyone is here eagerly anticipating hearing Emily's presentation. So even though I know not everybody has been able to get their coffee and donuts yet, we're running just a couple minutes behind, so I wanted to get us going with Emily as quickly as we could. Emily needs no introduction, so I'm not going to do one, other than just to say, please welcome Emily Voigt.
All you sweethearts, I'm glad to see everybody here this morning. By what twist of fate do I follow the Bishop of Indianapolis? Where are you? Oh, okay. So, really? My son is going to tape it. After I told Jason I'd be happy to speak as an Easter person, I started thinking, well, what even does that mean, being an Easter person? So I Googled it, and one response I saw said this: an Easter person is one who carries the resurrection in heart and mind and glories in gratitude for everlasting life. Carries the resurrection in heart and mind and glories in gratitude for everlasting life. That is what Jesus did for us at the resurrection, reconciled our broken selves to God, and gave us hope of living with him forever. That's big. That is the biggest. That's a lot for me to hold in my head. But what it boils down to for me is an Easter person is one who is reconciled through Jesus Christ to God. I am an Easter person filled with gratitude because I can have a relationship with the Creator of the universe. The mighty ruler of all time and space cares for me, hears me, guides me, and loves me. It's incredible. It's amazing. An Easter person. I didn't always know this, of course. Really, does anybody just spring up and know the love of God without ever doubting or disputing or just plain falling asleep? That hasn't been my way. I love what the author and poet Maya Angelou said, and I know that Heath likes it too because I've heard it in her sermon. Maya Angelou said, "I'm always amazed when people walk up to me and say, 'I'm a Christian.' I think, already? You already got it?" "I'm working at it," said she. "Me too. I'm working at it." Oh, there's Eric. The rubric that Jason gave for us for the Easter talk says, tell the story of how God has come into your life. So this is my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm going to read it, because I don't have the gifts that Eric has. Did he not do an elegant job last week? He has a He has a beautiful and poignant story, and he told it to us effortlessly, seemingly effortlessly. So I'm reading it, my story. My mother was the first one who set me on my path and was the first one to contribute to my understanding of myself and God. My mother was a lifelong Episcopalian and basically swept me and my brothers up into Sunday school and church from the time of our baptisms. We moved to the area in 1965 and joined Holy Comforter. My mother was a model of love and steadfast faith. My father was not a church-going man, but I am most definitely his daughter. Not the extroverted part of him, I'm the opposite, but the part that said, be self-reliant, keep your own counsel. I thought the sun rose and set on my dad. Curiously, I started to sort of swerve from the path that my mom set me on in junior high Sunday school up in the old Great Hall. Do you remember up there? Yeah, I was up there with Cindy McFarlane and George Drew and Jim Murray and Lori First. We were obviously all went through Sunday school all together. Well, we had a movie about world religions, and I remember thinking, well, what about all those devout Jews and Muslims and Buddhists? Who's to say that we have all the answers and they don't? Got me thinking. And then at New Trier and in college, I read all the classics like everyone. I was a lit major in college, and there were 0 books on Christianity in the curriculum. I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Samuel Beckett, the existential playwright, so no light there. It was a very good education. I loved all those books. I am glad that I read them. It was a very good education geared to the world. So I left college with a pretty well-defined secular humanist point of view. Oof, I don't know if I want to, I'm ashamed of this. One Christmas I came home, I had the audacity to tell my mother that I would go to church at Christmas, not because of God, but because of the people. Shame on me. I shouldn't have done that to my mom. So I did my course of study at school. One other big thing at school, at college, I met Rick Voigt. Rick is the most significant God-bearer in my life, meaning he carried God to me. God was watching out for me even then, though I didn't know it. I'm certain he picked Rick for me, in part, as a way of drawing me to himself. It's kind of obvious to me in hindsight. Rick and I didn't actually date until a few years after college, when we were living in different cities. It was a most unlikely relationship, conducted long distance and with religion as one of the central issues. All the sacred and spiritual books I didn't read in college, Rick sent them to me. During these 2 years. C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, J.B. Phillips, and eventually a Bible. He took a tremendous risk. He opened himself up to a tremendous amount of scorn. But isn't this how we know Rick? He's a risk taker and a guy who wants to get to yes. So for love or for whatever else God had in mind, we were married May 16th, 1987. Rick agreed that Episcopalians were okay, and I agreed to give faith a try. That was 30 years ago. Really, 30 years on the 16th of this month. The best, most tangible, most durable, most convincing evidence that God willed for us to be together is our 2 sons. Gordon was born in 1989 and Stuart in 1991. They are outstanding men with discerning minds and loving hearts. And like parents everywhere, we love them more than our lives. One example of the working out of my faith in these years, post-marriage years, was my journey with my parents at the end of their lives. My father died in 1995, relatively quickly, and my mother died in 2005. In this 10-year walk with my mother, I was driven, absolutely driven, to seeing that she was safe and without, without fear and treated with the dignity that she deserved. The whole healthcare nursing home continuum is a very confusing place and getting more confusing by the day. I absolutely clung to the 32nd Psalm like a life preserver. I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. I claimed God's presence. Yes, I was working at it, as Maya Angelou would say. I was working at my faith. In the ensuing years, I worked at understanding my faith through Education for Ministry with Barbara Haljan. There's Barbara. And some of these phrases come from EFM. The God-bearer, that's an EFM term. And I had 8 years of Bible study fellowship with Carol Alexander. I worked at finding a ministry and vocation for myself. I joined the altar ministry. I was trained by Ann Teeple, and I followed Sue Murphy into the leadership after learning everything I could from her. I participated in 2 Sojourners groups with Nancy Lovely, which was formative for working out my faith. Most recently, I have become a Stephen minister, training with Jean Britt and Pam Martin and others. Oh, and I have worshiped at Holy Comforter with all of you, pretty much without interruption since the boys were born. These are all the connections that Eric talked about last week, perhaps, all the people who point the way and share the load and who mean so much to me. 3 years ago, I conceived the idea of hiking the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James in northern Spain. More accurately, the idea seized me. It captured my imagination entirely. And in hindsight again, that was probably the Holy Spirit whistling around. Why did I go? I was approaching 10 years in my job at Ramona School. I worked with special ed kids at a 1st through 4th grade level. I was approaching a new decade of my life. I was remembering my mother and what she was able and not able to do toward the end of her life. I felt I wanted to do something that was challenging, something really hard while I could. What is it? You all know probably what it is. Maybe a lot of you have seen the movie, Martin Sheen's movie, On the Way. The Camino stretches 500 miles from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in southwestern France to Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain, where St. James the Apostle is said to be buried, east to west, toward the setting sun. It's an ancient path, probably first walked by the pagan Celts before Christ. Then in the early Christian years, it was sort of taken over by the church. And then in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, thousands of pilgrims walked, and they were protected by the Knights Templar from against the Moors who were present coming up from Morocco in the south. And then in 2016, to give you an idea of the popularity of the walk, about 250,000 people walked at least a part of the Camino. Yeah, that's all year long. Most people walk in the summer months. At its most basic, the Camino is walking. You do an average of 15 miles a day. Eating and drinking water. You eat you eat when you're hungry and when you come across a cafe, or you eat what's in the backpack that you're carrying. Getting clean and sleeping. And there are pilgrim hostels at the end of each day's walk, and no reservations required. Just walk in with your backpack. Physical preparation. I did a ton of physical and practical preparation. I read everything in sight. I worked with a trainer, and I hiked all over the country. I researched and tested gear. I joined an online Camino group and hiked with a group of Chicago pilgrims. I worked with my principal to resign from school mid-year. I took Spanish. I was very ready physically, but I hadn't done much spiritual preparation. It is a pilgrimage after all. Well, God spoke on that subject before I'd even left. I'm getting a drink. God spoke on the subject of my spiritual preparation. Specifically, God spoke to me on 16th Street in Wilmette. Truly, it was the Saturday before I was to fly out on the Monday, and I was finishing a 15-mile round trip up and back on the Green Bay Trail, and I was having a terrible pain in my hip and in my foot, a weird pain that I'd never experienced before, trying not to panic and saying, why now? What is this? What are you trying to tell me, that I'll never be able to walk the Camino? And just then, the little red car pulled up, and the window rolled down, and a guy hollered out, "I hiked in Spain in the fall." And I said, "Well, who is this guy? Is this a is he been talking with Rick?" Or I had no idea who he was. He said, "The Camino de Santiago." And I said, "I'm leaving on Monday." He said, "I'm pulling over." And I know it wasn't an angel sent down from heaven. It was John McGrath from Winnetka. But that is exactly what it felt like to me that day. That before he'd even parked his car and come across the street to me, I was smiling, thinking, God, you have such a sense of humor. And the message that I got was as clear as could be. It was, I will watch over you. Everything will be all right. I will give you everything you need. And importantly, you are to rely on me. Revelation from my father telling me to be self-reliant. Here was God telling me, you are to rely on me. And I don't get messages from God. I wish I did, but that's what I received that day. Rely on him. So the Camino had gone from being a mere walk to a pilgrimage. The ancient tradition of pilgrims on the way is that they carry a stone from home and deposit it at the end of the journey. Supportive friends sent me with sacred stones and precious scallop shells, which is the sign of St. James that they collected from their pilgrimages. Friends and family prayed for me. My Stephen Minister friends had a prayer chain going for me. So there wasn't a moment when I wasn't being prayed for. And believe me, I felt your presence. I prayed your names, and I prayed your beautiful tokens like they were the rosary. I felt completely covered in prayer. I absolutely flung myself onto the Camino on April 6th of last year. I felt liberated. So much preparation finally becoming a reality. I did rely on God, and God did provide abundantly. It was like Anne Lamott's 3 essential prayers. Help, thanks, wow. My prayers were answered every time and in spectacular fashion. Please help me be open to others and not be afraid. Be with me as I problem solve directions, accommodations, logistics. Please help me be present every moment and help me to remember everything I experience. Please let my body stay strong. I prayed my gratitude. I prayed for everyone here. I prayed that I could be of help to someone else. Help, thanks, wow. This is where I found my personal relationship with God. He opened my heart. It really was the trip of a lifetime. The people I walked with, the Spanish countryside, the medieval towns, paella, the physical challenge, storks and cuckoos, pagan, Roman, Christian influences, the hostels, Gaudi. It was fantastic. I arrived in Santiago on May 8th, 33 days after I had begun, which is 1 year tomorrow. For the record, I didn't once experience that same pain in my hip or my foot. I'm just saying. So what now? In Chris's contemplative Eucharist service, the priest says, because we have been liberated by a self-offering God, we are empowered to offer ourselves back to God, to one another, and to the world. I feel I have been liberated. I pray every morning now, as I did on the Camino. I want to honor what God has done for me. Since returning, I've taken a significant journey with a care receiver through the Stephen Ministry. And I'm actually going to be training to be a Stephen leader, which is a huge honor for me. I'm tutoring a third grader in the Howard Area Reading Program. Where's Bill? With Bill Holland and Steve Crawford. I love working with the kids, and I get to keep up my teaching skills. I'm still serving with the altar ministry, which nurtures my contemplative self. And I'm planning another walk. It's not a pilgrimage per se, but I'm walking across England in September, the coast to coast, from the Irish Sea to the North Sea. So, not a pilgrimage, but I think the same things will pertain, contemplation, and so I'm still working at it. It's a challenge, I'll admit, to be so intentional, so open to God's presence with all the distractions and responsibilities of living in North America, but I'm working at it. Whether or not I always understand or agree, I'm working at the Christian I am becoming. I'm grateful to everyone in this parish, grateful to the clergy, and to every single person I have served with and walked with, everyone in the room. You love my mother. You have loved me since I was a girl. You love my husband and my family, and I love you. And I'm going to say Psalm 121 for you. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore.